Govinda. And did I turn? Is that recording? Can you double check the camera? I forgot if I pushed the button. I think I pushed the button. Okay. Jai Ma. Om Mangalam Gurudevaya Devya Matriksha Mangalam Mangalam Bhakta Brindevya Sarva Lokaya Mangalam Om Stapakaya Chidharmasya Sarva Dharma Sarupine Avatara Varishtaya Ramakrishnaya Te Namaha Om Sarashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Ashmaracharya Prayantam Vande Gurum Paramparam Om Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Deva Maheshwara Guru Deva Param Brahman Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Ganesha Sharada Guru Pyo Namaha Hari Om Jai Ma Jai Ma. So we're taking a slight detour from our Kali Sahasranama talks. You'll see sometimes our detours take a year. But I think this is a one-day year. I mean, I think the Kali Sahasranama talks were a detour. So, the problem, if you miss an exit, you get on a whole different freeway. It's hard to get off. So actually, because today is January 11th, tomorrow, I'm smart, 12th. I'm really good. Okay, that's right. So January 12th is the birthday of Swami Vivekananda as per the lunar calendar, the solar calendar, by the date, right? So in India, it's celebrated as National Youth Day. Swamiji is very idealistic for the youth, and so there's a big all over India the celebration. Swami Vivekananda, but specifically the youth, and then the ritual observance of his birthday is usually done on the Tithi, which I think is Saptami or something like that. Would be on Thursday. I think this coming Thursday is Swami Vivekananda's birthday by the lunar calendar. So last year, same thing. I think we interrupted our normal program to read a talk by Swami Vivekananda. I think last year we read a talk on the need for a universal religion or something like that. A very nice discussion. So this is actually in a similar. What I'm reading, what I chose to read from is called "The Necessity of Religion," and in this version, the version I'm reading from right now is Vivekananda, the Yogas and Other Works. It's a beautiful one-volume collection edited by Swami Nikhilananda. So that's why I have a similar cover to the Gospel of Ramakrishna, just a different color, same style. And I should have just before, my plan before sitting down was to double check whether or not Jnana Yoga, the normal Jnana Yoga starts with this lecture or not. I don't remember. Because sometimes he adds a few things. He edits a chapter slightly different than the original publications, but in this version, it's found it's the first lecture in the Swamiji's probably most famous book, Jnana Yoga. And Swami Nikhilananda also edits it a little differently. He cleans up the English in his own way, and so it may be if you're reading, or if you look at the like under the complete works or under Jnana Yoga, it may be slightly, some things are different, or I think in the original he may quote a verse, and here he doesn't. They leave out the verse, so like that. So I'm using this version not because it's better, because it looks cool on the, I always like it. It's like it's like my favorite like tome type thing. So it doesn't give the date, but it says delivered in London. So the necessity of religion. So we were talking over tea that a title, Necessity of Religion or The Origin of Religion, something like that, is not a sexy topic now. It's not trending, right? And we were, like you mentioned, we'd be kicked out. What is it? Kicked out of a conference now, a religious conference. If my topic today was on the origins of religion or something like that, people don't. That it's seen too idealistic, too dogmatic in a certain sense, to make such a statement. And even during Swamiji's time, this is something. Since last time I talked about this was a year ago, almost exactly, maybe a year ago exactly today, Swamiji's talks at the Parliament of Religion. Adi Keshav suggested a very interesting book on the founding ideas of the religions, and it has a wonderful chapter on the Parliament of Religions. And one thing it points out is that there were no scholars at that conference. Right, scholars were invited, but no scholars attended. 3 or 4 scholars, like Max Mueller, he sent a paper to be read, but he didn't attend. Right, so it wasn't a scholarly gathering, because it was seen as too idealistic, too aspirational. It's about the unity of religions, and it's almost the idea of like a parliament of religions, where the people of different religions come together and express their ideas. Itself is a religious idea. It was a new religion of the time. It was like this progressive new approach that sprung from certain schools of Protestantism of the time, certain type. But the scholars of the time, they were studying what they call, at that time the title was the science of religion. Now we call it religious studies or other things. Now it's in all these different departments, but that was called the science of religion. So this lecture does not fit into the science of religion as studied now. But it's interesting, it fully fits the time. What I was amazed, and I was like kind of skimming it this morning over my morning coffee, how it was the discussion of Swamiji's time, so we'll see. And so he's, by giving his definition, in a certain sense, like where religious consciousness comes from, where does religion start, right? He's giving, in a certain sense, a highly spiritual, highly interpreted, aspirational, coming from Sri Ramakrishna and mysticism and his own idealism of the call of the human soul, longing for God, longing for the infinite, longing for the absolute, like this. So we'll see what Swamiji says. Of all the forces that have worked and are still working to mold the destinies of the human race, none certainly is more potent than that whose manifestation we call religion. All social organizations have as their background, somewhere, the workings of that peculiar force, and the greatest cohesive impulse ever brought into play among human units have been derived from this power. It is obvious to all of us that in very many cases the bonds of religion have proven stronger than the bonds of race or clime or even of descent. It is a well-known fact that persons worshiping the same God, believing in the same religion, have stood by each other with much greater strength and constancy than people of merely the same descent or even than brothers. Various attempts have been made to trace the beginnings of religion. In all the ancient religions that have come down to us at the present day, we find one claim made, that they are all supernatural, that their genesis is not, as it were, in the human brain, but that they have originated somewhere outside of it. Now, of course, there's never been a force that's brought people together as strong. That's true. And in other places, you have to always understand that's the complete works of Swami Vivekananda are 9 volumes, and 9 volumes that barely repeat themselves. So there's a lot. You can find a lot, and if you go through it. He also usually here he doesn't in this thing, but usually right after such a statement he said, "And never has there been a cause of more dissent, more bloodshed, more hatred, more bigotry, more separation between men and brothers and sisters." And then really he often uses that. That's not his theme here, but we can always put it together that it's a powerful force for good or for evil, as we know. So whatever its use, it's a powerful force. And that the claim is that it doesn't originate in the brain of man. It originates from a supernatural source. And that's, of course, already you're starting with a very radical claim. That's not that may be what many, actually not what many, probably what all religious people usually think, or it's like it's a revealed religion. God entered humanity. Literally, God started the world, right? But then God reveals to the world ways for him, her, they to understand them. Reveals their knowledge and their relationship. And so the claim of the scripture as being, the word of God or eternal, coexisting, and somehow are revealed by a prophet, a messenger of God, or a little more broadly in the ecstatic trances or visions of saints, or go beyond the top 5 religions that we learned about in school, to the visions of the shamans and intuitions of like that. So that those would be in the category of supernatural, coming from beyond time, beyond space, beyond creation, and being revealed, right? That's not how religion is talked about in academics, of course. You also have a degree in religious studies. The most I studied in school on this topic is not, of course, if that could be a degree in theology, not a degree in religion, if we're talking about, how exactly God started religion or something like that. Instead, it's like we could say, what different religions believe about how God started religion. That could be done as a topic, as one step back. But a more, you see in common discussions and in the world, we hear things like, God creates man in his image. We have like that, or that's it's almost a cheap thing to say. It's not very sophisticated, right? But behind it is actually a lot of sophisticated ideas, like and there's many. And Swamiji is only going to mention a few possibilities, right? Is that one is like like the question is like, we see people dying, and then and so what happens after we die? Is there anything that survives after death? And so that could be a source of beginning of religious consciousness. Or there's so many things we don't understand how they happen, so we can attribute it to a divine being to explain the unexplained or the unexplainable. That's another view, that we create or develop, maybe not just one big creation of religion, but the religion develops like this idea. Others like that. We can go through. There's a bunch of these. That also that man's longing for meaning, man's need for man's. I'm using man, the large man. We can change the language. Humanity's need for meaning, right, leads to we're meaning-seeking and meaning-creating creatures. A very create meaning, right? Maybe there's no meaning, maybe there is meaning, but we need meaning. Obviously, that's the quality of the human species, and so we find it or we create it, one of the two, right? And therefore, that's a source of religion. It's a source of not just, it's a source of all kinds of things. Our meaning-seeking nature, right? So that's another possible source, right? And Sri Ramakrishna, it's interesting. Sri Ramakrishna, he never talked like this, right? And he used the language, God has created all the religions, right? And so that's, I remember when I'd read, in our discussions or reading, we make it in front of our dear friend Igor. A few people know Igor here. He hasn't been around in a while, but you mentioned something like, something like a Joseph Campbell approach to seeing that why there's so many similarities in mythologies and practice of religions, because the human nature is the same, and we have the same biology and the same neurology, and therefore we create the same symbols for like that. He just, every time I even mention, he'd attack, right? This is, no, God created the religions, all of them, not your need for neurological whatever, like he doesn't really, he defended, like he was a Ramakrishna school for sure, right? And the idea is that it's not like man searching that we create images of God or ideas of God or ideas of the absolute, but that God reveals them, right? And perhaps I'm a little bit, I tend to say, because I have no problem thinking either way, right? Describing, and I think maybe they may be saying the same thing. God may reveal the truth because people are seeking the truth, right? And God takes on forms, or reveals his forms to those who want forms, who want ideas, who want concepts. So something like that. They may not be separate things. Maybe the same thing or similar things seen from different angles, right? So I personally don't have any problem with this. I like Chakra's statement that he created all the religions, right? According to the need, right? But that how he did that, how she did that, Thakur would probably say, is there may be very the aspirations of the human soul may be the thing that leads to it. Anyways, we'll see what Swamiji says. Two theories have gained some acceptance among modern thinkers, modern scholars. This is modern scholars at 1893, 94, 95. So these aren't modern. They're not contemporary to us. They were his contemporary scholars, and but these are big ones. One is the spirit theory of religion. The other, the evolution of the idea of the infinite. One party maintains that ancestor worship is the beginning of religious ideas. The other, that religion originates in the personifications of the powers of nature. Man wants to keep alive the memory of his dead relatives and thinks they are living even when the body is dissolved. He wants to place food for them and, in a certain sense, to worship them. Out of that desire came what we call religion. That's a very simple statement. You could see that's there. He's not presenting the full spectrum of this. It has been developed, right? I think even Swami Bhajanananda mentions it in the Lila Prasanga, some aspect of even how Hinduism had developed using kind of the theory. So he's even and that the idea that when somebody dies and it's like we feel they're still alive. There's some. Of course, we may feel they're still alive because they are still alive and the soul doesn't die. I mean, we could give it an immediate. That's proof of religion, right? But let's take a little looser, gentler stance. It's like they feel that they're still alive, and they treat them as still alive, and you feed them, and you worship them, and you visit their graves, and you have a shrine to them, and like this. And some people would hold, especially during Swamiji's time, and it's less prevalent now in religious studies, that this beginning of worship, that's the beginning of worship itself, the idea of a non-material entity, and therefore, and also of the beginning of worship. Now, I think it's probably overly simplistic, just to say like, oh, your religion, oh yeah, people were worshiping they didn't believe their ancestors died, or that's where religion comes from, and it all develops from that. I think it's maybe a little, it could be too simple, right? But there's nothing there. That is one of this is what many things in religion may have started in that way. Whether religion starts that way, with the capital R, that I don't know, or whether that's a simple answer to way to say, oh yes, by understanding this I understand all religion, or by understanding this I can dismiss all religion, right? That I think is a little cheap, right? But not very sophisticated. But anyways, studying the ancient religions of the Egyptians, Babylonians, and the Chinese, and many other races in America and elsewhere, we find very clear traces of this ancestor worship being the beginning of religion. With the ancient Egyptians, the first idea of the soul was that of a double. Now, of course, study of Egyptian religion has developed since Swamiji's time, so he's presenting the popular view of this. But anyways, every human body contained in itself another being very similar to itself. And when a man died, this double went out of his body and yet lived on. But the life of the double lasted only so long as the dead body remained intact. The idea of mummification and the like, right? And that is why we find among the Egyptians so much solicitude to keep the body uninjured. And that is why they built the huge pyramids in which they preserve the bodies. For if any portion of the external body was hurt, the double whom would be correspondingly injured. This is clearly ancestor worship. With the ancient Babylonians, we find the same idea of the double, but with a variation. So what Swamiji is saying is not. There is this view of the double, but it's perhaps overly simplified to say that that's why the pyramids existed, and it's like. But anyways, I'm not gonna. Each statement is. I think when you're reading from a lecture that presupposes the time of 100 years ago, it's changed since then. But the point is still, I think, good. With the ancient Babylonians, we find the same idea of the double with a variation. The double lost all sense of love. It frightened the living to make them give it food and drink and help it in various ways. So actually, this is true in many cultures, including in Hindu culture. That when somebody dies, then they actually become dangerous. Right? So we can worship the ancestors out of love for them, but also what if like they have connection to us, but they don't remember their relationship to us, right? They don't have the same body, they don't have a brain. They have the neuron. It's like when you the whatever the double is, whatever the soul is, whatever the spirit is, it's not doesn't have the same relationship triggers now, right? But it still has connections, and therefore it can be dangerous, and therefore a lot of worship is done to placate. And even now there's Hindu rituals that we do sometimes. Oh, like some astrologer, there's something wrong in your family, and you can't have a child. You need some type of stuff, and then they go to an astrologer or to a holy person. Oh, you need to do the thing to placate your family. There's ancestors that are angry with you, and it's and general Hinduism, the ancestors are the ones who are reborn as your children, right? So and therefore you have to make it's weird to us to think, well, the ancestors are angry with us, and therefore we're not going to have children. That's a weird thing, but it's not like they're purposely angry with us. They have a confused relationship, and we have to do. So this is another relationship to the ancestors somebody's mentioned. The basis of religion among the Chinese may also be said to be ancestor worship, and it still permeates the length and breadth of that vast country. In fact, the only religion that we can really be said to flourish in China is that of ancestor worship. Thus, on the one hand, it seems that a very strong case has been made for those who hold the theory of ancestor worship as the beginning of religion. On the other hand, there are scholars who from the ancient Aryan literature, show that religion originated in nature worship. Now, this is more the Indian side, right? And this we hear. I've read books on Vedic religion and ancient Vedic and pre-Vedic or non-Vedic religion that starts with this. That it originated in nature worship. Although in India we find proof of ancestor worship, yet in the oldest record there is no trace of it whatsoever. In the Rig Veda Samhita, the most ancient records of the Aryan race, we do not find any trace of it. Modern scholars think that it is the worship of nature that they find there. Right, so this is another view, and that the worship of nature itself, nature spirits, the elements, the powers of nature. Then they become deified, and you have Indra, which is rain and clouds. You have Varuna, which is the wind or the water. Vayu. You have the big cosmic, the big deities of the ancient world. Actually, it's interesting that they're basically, we lament sometimes that the ancient gods of the Vedas are no longer worshipped anymore. They've been replaced by another pantheon streaming from the Trinity, right? But in the Vedic rites, the Vedic hymns, the ancient Vedic hymns are dealing primarily with the gods that are control nature or are nature. They're nature personified, they're nature spirits, or they're controllers of nature, and perhaps that's also how they develop. So this is another, and then the worship of the gods. Then when we begin to think, then we can even get Vedanta out of that. Well, there's all these different gods. So there's all these different gods. Are they manifestating one? Are they connected? Are they aspects of one reality? You can see from even the idea of nature worship, you can develop with a few jumps to like an all-pervading Brahman. You can draw a line from nature worship to the abstract philosophy, but this is the Aryan, the Vedic perspective. The human mind seems to struggle to get a peep behind the scenes, the dawn, the evening, the hurricane, the stupendous and gigantic forces of nature and its beauties. All these have exercised the human mind, and it aspires to go beyond, to understand something about them. And the struggle it endows these phenomenon with personal attributes, giving them souls and bodies, sometimes beautiful, sometimes transcendental. Every attempt ends by these phenomena becoming abstractions, whether personalized or not. So also it is found with the ancient Greeks. Their whole mythology is simply this abstract nature worship. So also with the ancient Germans, the Scandinavians, and all the other Aryan races. Thus, on this side too, a very strong case has been made, like religion has its origins in the personification of the powers of nature. Swamiji also mentioned that they can become even if they're personified, they can be personified or not, but it's also, I think, a Indian tendency to abstract them. So it just becomes not just like a particular being that controls the weather. It becomes weather, and then it becomes It becomes more and more like a principle and an aspect of the greater principle. It becomes abstract this way. Right? These two views, although they seem contradictory, can be reconciled by a third view, a third basis, which to my mind is the real germ of religion. And this I propose to call the struggle to transcend the limitations of the senses. That's Swami's definition. He believes that actually you can see this definition in nature worship and the abstraction of nature worship, as well as in ancestor worship. The human desire, need, tendency to transcend or go beyond the senses, right? And so Swamiji, I have to say something, not just read, so I don't feel too bad about explaining. But Swamiji, we'll Swamiji, and then I'll expand it. Either a man goes to seek for the spirits of his ancestors, the spirit of the dead, that is, he wants, either a man goes to seek for the spirits of his ancestors, the spirits of the dead, that is, he wants to get a glimpse of what there is after the body is dissolved, or he desires to understand the powers working behind this stupendous phenomenon of nature. Whichever of these he wants, one thing is certain, that he tries to transcend the limitations of the senses. He cannot remain satisfied with his senses. He wants to go beyond them. So if the idea is like, you want to go beyond the grave. I mean, that's a very clear ending of the senses. We'll continue. The explanation need not be mysterious. To me, it seems very natural that the first glimpse of religion should come through dreams. The first idea of immortality man may well get through dreams. Is not dreaming a most wonderful state? And we know that children and untutored minds find very little difference between dreaming and their awakened state. Even during sleep, when the body is apparently dead, the mind goes on with all its intricate workings. What wonder that man will at once come to the conclusion that, when the body is dissolved forever, the same working will go on. This, to my mind, would be a more natural explanation of the supernatural. And through the dream idea, the human mind rises to higher and higher conceptions. So if you immediately dream, we experience everything in dream, but we're not. But it's not through the senses. It's not through the body. We experience a whole world that doesn't exist externally. So already at the beginning, you're beginning. There's a tendency in certain schools of yoga. Also, this tendency is there, and kind of clear-headed Vedanta, this tendency is there. Is like dreams mean not real, right? When you dream something, it didn't actually happen, so it's false. It's more false. This world may be false, but dreams are even more false, right? Because it's like the simple. There's a scene I may have mentioned was Ram Priyadas had a bad dream. Then he went to our Guruji Swami Omananda and he mentioned his dream, and he was very concerned about it. And so Guruji says, "So it was a dream, so not real, like it didn't actually happen, so it's like you're upset about something that didn't actually happen, right? It has meaning, of course. Then we give it, there's a projection of our unconscious and trying to tell us something, so there's all that, but there's another aspect that's from the very harsh logical perspective, right? Another aspect is dreams in a certain sense are maybe even more real because we're less limited in dream. If by real, we mean less limited. If the goal is to be not limited by the senses, to transcend the hard, cash, waking reality, right, and the rules of nature and the rules of the senses, and that the dreams in dream, we do that a little bit. Time has no meaning. Most outrageous things can be experienced. All kind. We all have this experience. I don't have a very rich dream life, so I don't have as much to remember. But some people have very rich dream lives, and people who cultivate their dream life, right? That's another thing, And because you see, it is a natural tendency because and there's whole spiritual practices that are based upon revelations in the dream, and the idea that you're getting revelations beyond the senses, and you're experiencing things beyond the senses. Others say, no, you're experiencing you're getting information from the senses and you're misinterpreting them and you're making up a false world and you're not, I can thing is, I can accept that too. But you all know there's dreams and dreams, right? So yeah, there's dreams and dreams, and then there's dreams. There's other types of dreams that are another category altogether, right? A lot of dreams are just the flotsam and jetsam of our daily experience being flushed out of the mind that we believe, right? But even that's interesting, that in the waking, through the senses and through the waking mind, we can't process everything we experience. So in the dream mind, even that is what a wonderful system to, otherwise you probably go crazy, you go over, you have to flush that out and experience it and digest it. But anyway, so that even this Swamiji is going that from especially in Hinduism, that and Vedanta holds the same thing, is that you go from like the waking state, and you have the dream state, then you have the dreamless state, right? Because in one sense, if you're bound by the senses and logic and the logic of the senses, of the sense world in the waking state, you're less bound by it in the dream state, right? To push it in a direction that Swamiji is probably not going to push it here. It's like you could be way beyond it in the dreamless state, right? But whether or not, the problem is that we don't remember our dreamless state, right? Vedanta says that's too bad, because in our dreamless state we're actually experiencing samadhi, right? But we do so through ignorance and unconscious. We're unconscious of the supreme reality that we're experiencing, And so that's exactly in this very book. Swamiji goes heavily into it in his Jnana Yoga book, but that's not the topic of today. What is the topic of today? Of course, in time, the vast majority of mankind found out that their dreams are not verified by their waking states, and that during the dream state, it is not that a man has a fresh existence, but simply he recapitulates the experiences of the awakened state. That's what we were saying. But by this time, the search had begun, and the search was inward, and they continued inquiring more deeply into the different stages of the mind, and discovered a higher state than either the waking or the dream state, either waking or the dreaming. That state, which we find in all organized religions of the world, is called either ecstasy or inspiration. So this is not exactly using the language of dreamless sleep and like that, but there seems to be experiences beyond the waking state that aren't just dream. But once you start getting oriented towards dreams and these type of experiences, you're already looking for something different, a different category of experience. So that may lend itself to this inspiration, intuition, and ecstasy. In all organized religions, their founders, prophets, and messengers are declared to have gone into a state of mind that was neither waking nor sleeping, in which they came face to face with a new series of facts relating to what they called the spiritual kingdom, a whole other world of experience. Right? They realize things there much more intensely than we realize facts around us in our waking state. Actually, I think it's a very radical thing to say when somebody says, "Oh, I've experienced something beyond the mind, beyond this world, right? Beyond the material realm, right?" So what can you say to such a person? There's no way to test their experience. There's no way for them to demonstrate their experience, right? Anyway, it's very interesting. The Vedas are said to take, for instance, the religion of the Hindus. We should do that. We can. This is what our general topic here is: the religions of the Hindus, and a corner of this neighborhood, right? The religions of the Hindus. The Vedas are said to have been written by rishis. These rishis were sages who realized certain facts. The exact definition of the Sanskrit term rishi is seer of mantras, of the thoughts conveyed in the Vedic hymns. These men declared that they had sensed, if that word could be used with regard to the supersensuous, certain facts, and these facts they proceeded to put on record. we find the same truth declared amongst both Jews and the Christians. So this is the rishis they declare that they sense, like he says, the problem is going beyond the senses, but a sense in a non-sense, not beyond, in a way to know or perceive or to experience beyond the normal instruments, details that the normal instruments cannot apprehend. So the claim is that there's something beyond the senses, and that there's a way to experience or gain that knowledge beyond the senses. And then they wrote it down. The rishis then, or spoke it, and then it got passed down. And he says the Jews and the Christians, this is the idea of the revealed scriptures. It's not identical, but a conception. But for this discussion, it's identical. Or they hear, God appeared to them, or they or in a dream, or sometimes it's in a dream. But they get fresh knowledge, or they get through anointing, or through some sort of revelation where they give that knowledge. Right. This is an interesting subpoint of what it means, whether or not like the normal scripture that we consider in most religions and a rishi seeing a Vedic mantra is identical or not. But it's a very interesting topic. They're related for sure. An exception may be made of the Buddhists as represented by the southern sect. It may be asked, if the Buddhists do not believe in any god or soul, how can their religion be derived from this supersensuous state of existence? The answer to this is that even the Buddhists find an eternal moral law, and that moral law was not reasoned out of our senses of the world, our sense of the world, but Buddha found it, discovered it in a supersensuous state. This is the claim. Whether Buddhists would agree with that representation, not all. Some would, some wouldn't. Right, but this is definitely the Hindu perspective on the Buddhist realization. Whatever the Buddha experienced, he experienced new knowledge. He got fresh understanding through a ecstatic peak experience. We call it the enlightenment. You can't get more peak experience than enlightenment, and therefore could speak. He didn't get there by just by reasoning from the senses. He didn't just infer from the senses the truth of the Buddha Dharma in the Buddhist relation. He also experienced it in some sense. It comes from a supersensuous transcendental state. Those of you who had studied the life of Buddha, even as briefly given in that beautiful poem, The Light of Asia, may remember that Buddha is represented as sitting under a bo tree until he reached that supersensuous state of mind. All his teachings came through this, and not through intellectual cogitation. That's definitely dates the lecture, The Light of Asia. Everybody ever read that Light of Asia? It's a small little book by Sir Edwin Arnold, I believe. It's beautiful. It's been a while since I've said that, but it's a beautiful poem describing the life of Buddha. But it was very popular during Swamiji's time. So it's interesting, and it's worthwhile. It's worth reading to see how Buddhism was popularized in the West during that time. It's a very interesting. You can critique it as being an Orientalist slant and all that type of stuff, but it's still very interesting. It's definitely a slice. Also Paramahansa Yogananda quotes that was like a pocketbook of his. I think I got my copy published by SRF or something. I think they're probably the only people in America that still publish it. But it's definitely of that period of time. Very, very beautiful. Thus, a tremendous statement is made by all the religions that the human mind at certain moments transcends not only the limitations of the senses, but also the power of reasoning. It then comes face to face with facts which it could never have sensed, could never have reasoned out. These facts are the basis of all the religions of the world. That's the big jump, right? But he's talking in very broad statements, right? But the statement is that the statement is made, the tremendous statement is made, that human mind at certain moments transcends not only limitation of the senses, but the power of reasoning beyond the senses and beyond the intellectual standards of reasoning. And comes face to face with facts, another category of facts, right? It's not like, if I can go into ecstasy and get the answer to my quiz or to a math thing. It's not that type of stuff, right? Unfortunately, I found in my math class at junior college that I took 7 times. right? Meditation didn't help at all in pre-algebra. Kirtan didn't help, japa didn't help, reading of the Vedas didn't help, asanas didn't help. Turns out you have to study algebra to get good at algebra, right? So the thing is it's not that super sensuous knowledge of things that can be sensed and reasoned out here into the senses, right? It's that another category of knowledge that can only be understood through beyond the senses and beyond the mind is the way we would say it now, probably, right? These facts are the basis of all religion of the world. Of course, we have the right to challenge these facts and put them to the test of reason. Nevertheless, all the existing religions of the world claim for the human mind this peculiar power of transcending the limits of the senses and the limits of reason. And this power they put forward as a statement of fact. I think that is a true thing, that either for everyone, or at least for some, or at least for one, right? Some access to another category of knowledge is claimed, right? Sometimes the claim is only the founder of a religion has that knowledge. Nobody else has. We can just believe him or follow him, and our only access to that category of knowledge is to believe those who have access to that category of knowledge. And there's a logic of that also. There's a lot of things that people just things that theoretically, if I couldn't pass if it took me 7 times to not pass my pre-algebra class, right, I'm not going to be able to get really good knowledge of astrophysics, things like that. I can't even basic math I couldn't handle, right. But so what do you do? So there, in a certain sense, theoretically, I could study and take the time and get tutors and become expert in some form of higher mathematics or higher the new physics or something, quantum theory and things like that. But I can't, right? I won't also. I don't think I can actually. I'm not willing to out of embarrassment because I like to be mildly successful. Things you try, I wouldn't be successful, right? But so in a certain sense, you have to trust those who've experienced it, right? I do trust, one thing I do trust expertise, and there's people who have expertise, right? There's people who have expertise of things beyond my personal understanding, right? I can have enough understanding to whether or not I should trust that person's expertise, credentials and things like this, So, but some of the claim is that it's for a select few to have this type of knowledge, and only way we can know about this knowledge is through following them and reading. Like we read the script, we read the Vedas. We don't see the Vedas like the original sages did, right? Right. Others is that only one person. It's like singular or like a prophet. Only the prophet can have this knowledge, right? Right. Like what I remembering our dear friend Swami Bodhicitta. Before he was Swami Bhajanananda, he was Baha'i, and the Baha'is it's one of he even told me, he says, if you were to judge the best religion, it could be the Baha'is by standard. He started checking off by views of this, by views of the modern world, by position of women, by position of just more by but he says, why aren't you Baha'i? He says, oh, only the Baha'u'llah has transcendental knowledge, right? He's a prophet. We can follow the prophet, can never be the prophet. And I want whatever the transcendental knowledge I have to experience, not just follow somebody who has experienced it, right? He says, but at face value, if I'm comparing them, it's superior in every way, by all the landmarks that you circle, except for the one that whether or not you can also experience, right? It's a prophetic religion. This is one of a potential glitch for many yogis of a prophetic religion it's like Swami Vivekananda many times said, it's like, well, one man, if a rishi or people that we consider prophets and saviors and Buddhas, right, and saints, right, but if they've experienced it, that means it can be experienced, right? And if it can't be experienced, then what does it matter what they claim to be experienced? If they've experienced, at least potentially should be experienceable. Of course, not everybody has the same talent, right? Or there's like an astrophysics. Not everybody's willing to go. Not everybody has a talent. And willing to put forth the work to have that experience. So sometimes we can just believe and follow the general teachings of those who we believe have had that type of experience. But this is but Swamiji's point. This is still a big point. People claim that there's a way of experience facts beyond the senses and beyond the mind, right? And that those facts do exist, right? And that is a central claim of religion, I think that's generally true in most cases. Of course, we have the right to challenge these facts, to put them to the test of reason. Nevertheless, all the existing religions of the world claim for the human mind a particular power of transcending the limits of the senses and the limits of reason, and that power they put forth as a statement of fact. Apart from this consideration of the question of how far these facts claimed by religion are true, we find one characteristic in common to them all. They are all abstractions, as contrasted with the concrete discoveries of physics. For instance, and in all these highly organized religions, they take the purest form of abstract unity, as either an abstract presence or an omnipresent being, or an abstract personality called God, or a moral law, or an abstract essence underlying every existence. So I like it's like whatever you claim, whatever they're claiming from this experience, whether you believe that, like, there's a lot of claims of people who believe themselves or other who believe them to be prophets or sages or real like that, and I look at theirs like going, oh well, that can't be right, right? We can and you present them in the competition of religious ideas. Some of them, we don't feel comfortable accepting, those principles and things like that. So that, because independent of that, right, we find a tendency to universalize or abstract whatever their discoveries are, right, into, like I say, into to a point like a unity or an essence or a supreme, not just a being but a supreme being, not just a principle but like foundational principles and like this. In modern times, too, the attempt made to preach religions without appealing to the supersensuous state of mind In modern times, too, the attempt made to preach religions without appealing to the supersensuous state of mind have had to take up the old abstractions of the ancients to give them different names to them, such as moral law, the ideal unity, and so forth, thus showing that these abstractions are not in the senses. None of us have yet seen the ideal human being, and yet we are told to believe in him. None of us have yet seen the ideal perfect man, yet without that ideal, we cannot progress. This is a big theme of Swami Vivekananda's in his Vedanta, Practical Vedanta lecture. He talks about this idea of without even an abstract ideal beyond us, whatever that is. It's like, and we don't progress, even though we've never seen it. We've never, and even if we don't think we can attain it, but without some ideal. Swami will continue. Thus, one fact stands out from all these different religions, that there is an ideal abstract unity, which is put before us in the form of either a person, capital P, or an impersonal being, or law, or a presence, or of an essence. That covers a bunch of categories of religion. A person, a presence, a essence, or an impersonal ground of being, right? We are always struggling to raise ourselves up to that ideal. Every human being, whosoever and wherever he may be, has an ideal of infinite power. Every human being has an ideal of infinite pleasure. Most of the works that we find around us, the activities displayed everywhere, are due to the struggle for this infinite power or this infinite pleasure. We quote all the time our Guruji saying the same thing. That we want, actually, the real, what we're struggling for is not just a little bit of experience or a little bit of happiness. We talked about this a couple weeks ago in the Kali Sasanama talks also, with the name Ananda and this Paramananda and things like this, right? We're actually seeking infinite. We want more. We want the infinite. We want infinite happiness, infinite experience. But a very few quickly discover that although they are struggling for infinite power, it is not through the senses that it can be reached. They find out very soon that the infinite pleasure is not to be got through the senses, or in other words, that the senses are too limited and the body is too limited to express the infinite. To manifest the infinite through the finite is impossible, and sooner or later man learns to give up this attempt to express it through the finite. And the quote I always tell of our Guruji is to search for infinite value from a finite object, or permanent value from an impermanent object. You're bound to be frustrated. Eventually you realize that it has to be found another way. This giving up, this renunciation of the attempt is the background of ethics. Now, Swamiji, what time is it now? 6 o'clock. Okay, we're after Swamiji's unique definition of ethics. I forgot. Oh yeah, this is where one of the places he goes into his definitions of ethics. Right. Swami has a unique definition of religion and a unique definition of ethics. We'll see. This giving up, this renunciation of the attempt. What's the attempt? To find pleasure through the senses. To seek finite is a background of ethics. Renunciation is the very basis which ethics stands. There never was an ethical code preached which has not renunciation for its basis. Right? Ethics always says, not I, but thou. The motto is not self, but not self, but non-self. Here, but means the other, not just. The vain ideas of individualism to which man clings when he is trying to find that infinite power or that infinite pleasure through the senses, these have to be given up, says the laws of ethics. You have to put yourself last and others before you. The senses say, myself first. Ethics say, I must hold myself last. Thus all codes of ethics are based upon renunciation, destruction, not construction, of the individual on the material plane. Now, these are strong ideas, right? And so Swamiji, one of the other places he says, actually, and I'm not sure if he fully goes into it here, I forget, but that his ethic theory is based upon the self. Because any statement of why should I be nice to you instead of, why should I care about your wants along with mine or instead of mine or above mine, when if the utilitarian thing is like, if the purpose of life is pleasure, I should get pleasure, right? Why should I deny pleasure for your benefit, right? There's a sense of the self. There's a sense of the other, the non-self in others, the self in the non-self. There's something transcending our limited personality, our limited ego, and the limited that's experience of the world with limited senses and the limited mind, right? That as soon as you begin to intuit the larger, the universal, the subtle, right? Then, and you search for it, right? It's going to adjust your behavior in this way. So. The infinite will never find expression. Oh, I got that building. People are startled if they are asked not to think about their individuality. They seem very much afraid of losing what they call their individuality. At the same time, the same man would declare the highest ideal of ethics to be right, never for a moment thinking that the scope, the goal, the ideal of all ethics is the destruction and not the building up of the individual. Utilitarians, standards, cannot explain the ethical relations of men. For in the first place, you cannot derive any ethical law from consideration of utility. I think there's some modern thinkers that can say that in a different way, but we'll leave it for his time. Without the struggle towards the infinite, without the supernatural sanction, as it is called, or the perception of the superconscious, as I prefer to term it, there can be no ethics. Without the struggle towards the infinite, there can be no ideal. Any system that wants to bind men down to the limits of their own societies is not able to find an explanation for the ethical laws of mankind. The utilitarian wants to give up the struggle after the infinite, the reaching out for the supersensuous, the impractical and absurd, and in the same breath ask us to take up ethics to do good to society. Why should we do good? Doing good is a secondary consideration. We have an ideal. We must have an ideal. Ethics itself is not the end, but is a means to the end. If the end is not there, why should we be ethical? Why should I do good to other men and not injure them? If happiness is the goal of mankind, why should I not make myself happy and others unhappy? What prevents me? If we want, but I think if we want the transcendental, we have to live with that knowledge also. In the second place, the basis of utility is too narrow. All the current social forms and methods are derived from society as it exists. But what right has a utilitarian to assume that society is eternal? Society did not exist ages ago, possibly will not exist ages hence. The idea is like that's all the current social forms and methods are derived from society as it exists. But it's nothing. Guruji, he was very, every time of course there's a lot of geopolitical stirrings right now making everybody uncomfortable. But I remember Carlos made when I think the first bombing of Kuwait or something. I remember that thing. And Carlos took Guruji on the following newspapers. We bombed Kuwait, Guruji, America. This is the beginning of World War III. He's like, of course, luckily, well, he wasn't predicted, but he was always waiting. He says the whole thing's been built up in 200 years, 300 years, 400 years. It will crash just as quickly. I mean, I'm hoping not. We're praying for everybody like that. But he always said like that. It's like this is the, and he said, "Do not worry, you're eternal." I was always there. Like made me very nervous to hear some things. But his point is like we build this whole thing about what about our, like of course we build them up and we try to, but they can crash really easy, right? Put everything on on the most changing. To give too much value to one of the most changing aspects of life. That's the point. Society did not exist years ago, possibly will not exist ages hence. Most probably it is one of the passing stages through which we're going through towards a higher evolution. And any law that is derived from society alone cannot be eternal, cannot cover the whole ground of man's nature. At best, therefore, utilitarian theories can only work under present social conditions. Beyond that, they have no value. But in morality, an ethical code derived from religion and spirituality has the whole of infinite man for its scope, not just the finite parts, right? Not just the changing society rules. It has the infinite. It has the infinite human potential, infinite potential as its scope. It takes up the individual, but its relations are to the infinite, and it takes up the society also. But society is nothing but members of these individual grouped together. And as it applies to the individual, it has eternal relations. It must necessarily apply to the whole of society, in whatever condition it may be at any given time. Thus we see that there is always a necessity of spiritual religion for mankind. Man cannot always think of matter, however pleasurable it may be. Actually, this is another interesting point. There's one of my professors at Berkeley, Robert Bellah. He's a famous sociologist, one of the... I think he's still living. If he's still living, he's probably one of the main theologians of religion. And he used to use this term. It's been a long time. Tried going back to his term. But he used to say that the senses that humans cannot bear the ordinary. Right. This is his term. We cannot live in the ordinary. The mundane, or the senses, or like that, is actually, we think we live, that's how we go to work, how we make money, how we do stuff, how we cook like that. But you see, we drink, we watch TV, we smoke pot, we do all. I mean, we're escaping reality all the time. We're playing video games, right? We cannot. The regular reality is. I remember now the realm of everyday life. Right, he says the realm of everyday life is no human being can survive in it for even hours at a time. We're constantly escaping, daydreaming. If we do it, we'll kill ourselves. I mean, it's unbearable, right? And so some people make it a point. I mean, religion then becomes a search for the extraordinary, not the everyday, right? So that the search. It's another. He's in his modern or more recent scholarship. He was somebody who interviewed. He was a field scholar interviewing people and about their religious quests and things like that, right? How he came up with these ideas. But he said we cannot live in the realm of the senses for long, right? Man cannot always think of matter, however pleasurable it may be. You see, it has been said that too much attention to things spiritual disturbs our practical relations in this world. Right? Too much religious thinking ruins everything. I think that's true. As far back as the days of the Chinese sage Confucius, it was said, "Let us take care of the world, and then, when we have finished with the world, we can take care of the other worlds." It is all very well that we should take care of this world, but if too much attention to the spiritual may affect our practical relations a little, too much attention to the so-called practical hurts us here and in the hereafter, for it makes us materialistic. Man is not to regard nature as his goal, but something higher. Man is man so long as he's struggling to rise above nature. This is one of, Swamiji has these great definitions. The definition of a human being is you're a human if you're struggling to go beyond your human nature, right? That's a very great, he has these wonderful definitions, right? Man is man as long as he is struggling to rise above nature. And this nature is both internal and external. Not only does it comprise the laws that govern the particles of the universe of matter outside of us and in our bodies, but also the more subtle nature within. That is, in fact, the motive power governing the external. It is good and very grand to conquer external nature, but grander still to conquer our internal nature. Now we have to Swamiji's language. We won't use this language anymore. We're not like conquering external nature is not like lording it over, but so it's where we wouldn't that's a unfortunate word now. We wouldn't say like, conquer nature and conquer not this manly type of aggressive warlike conquer nature and conquer this, but just master as in we should be masters of our environment and that type of, it's part of Swamiji's language of his time. It is grand and good to know the laws that govern the stars and planets. It is infinitely grander, and better to know the laws that govern the passions, the feelings, the will of mankind. This conquering of the inner man, understanding the subtle workings that are within the human mind, and knowing its wonderful secrets, belongs entirely to religion. The human mind, the ordinary human mind, wants to see big material facts. The ordinary man cannot understand anything that is subtle. Well has it been said that the masses admire the lion, that it kills 1,000 lambs. Never for a moment thinking that although it is a momentary triumph for the lion, it is death of the lambs, because the masses find pleasure only in the manifestation of physical strength. We can see that, that's very interesting. We say, oh, what a powerful lion. But thus it is with ordinary human. If I comment, I'm going to run into. I want to finish it. Swamiji always goes boom, 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 and then slams it at the end. I want to get to the slammed ending. If I keep talking, I won't get there. But I have a lot to say on this. I love this. I like this. This stuff is good. Massive pleasure. Thus it is with ordinary run of mankind. They understand and find pleasure in everything that is external. But in every society, there is a section whose pleasures are not in the senses, but beyond, and who now and then catch glimpses of something higher than matter and struggle to reach it. So hopefully this august assembly here, we gather in this way. We sense something beyond the senses. Maybe we sometime experience it to some level, and we're after it. This is our goal. This is a real goal. And if we read the history of nations between the lines, we shall always find that the rise of the nations comes with an increase in the number of such men, and the fall begins when this pursuit after the infinite, however vain and utilitarians call it, has ceased. That is to say, the mainspring of the strength of every race lies in its spirituality, and the death of the race begins the day that spirituality wanes and materialism gains ground. Thus, apart from the solid fact and truth that we may learn from religion, apart from the comforts that we may gain from it, religion as a science, as a study, is the greatest and healthiest exercise that the human mind can have. This pursuit of the infinite, that's Swamiji's definition and working definition of religion right now. This pursuit of the infinite, this struggle to grasp the infinite, this effort to get beyond the limitations of the senses, out of matter, as it were, and to evolve the spiritual man, this striving day and night to make the infinite one with our being, this struggle itself is the grandest and most glorious that man can make. Some persons find their greatest pleasure in eating. We have no right to say that they should not. Others find the greatest pleasure in possessing certain things. We have no right to say that they should not. But they also have no right to say that the man who finds his highest pleasure in spiritual thought. The lower the organization, the greater the pleasure in the senses. And very few men can eat a meal with the same gusto of a dog or a wolf. But all the pleasure of the dog and the wolf have gone, as it were, into the senses. The lower types of humanity in all nations find pleasure in the senses, while the cultured and the educated find it in thought, in philosophy, in arts, and sciences. Spirituality is still a higher plane. The subject being infinite, that plane is the highest, and the pleasure there is the highest for those who can appreciate it. Even so, on utilitarian grounds, man is to seek for pleasure. He should cultivate religious thought, for it is the highest pleasure that exists. Even if you want pleasure, if we're pleasure seeking, and we are, another definition, Swamiji's definition of the human being is one who tries, what was it? Searching for the infinite. A good definition is we're also pleasure seeking, right? So these are not contradictory, right? The desire for pleasure, when one gets a glimpse of what possible, that in last week's talk, Paramananda is possible, the supreme higher category. Thus, religion as a study seems to me to be absolutely necessary. It seems to me also to be absolutely necessary. We can see it in its effect. It is the greatest motive power that moves the human mind. No other idea can put us into the same massive energy than the spiritual can. So far as human history goes, it is obvious to all of us, that this has been the case, and that its powers are not dead. I do not deny that men, on simply utilitarian grounds, can be very good and moral. There have been many great men in this world, perfectly sound, moral, and good, simply on utilitarian grounds. But the world movers, men who bring, as it were, a mass of magnetism into the world, whose spirit works in hundreds and in the thousands, whose life ignites others with a spiritual fire, such men, we always find, have that spiritual background. Their motive power came from religion. Religion is the greatest motive power for realizing that infinite energy, which is the birthright and nature of every man. Another one of Swamiji's themes, the infinite energy is our nature and our birthright. It's who we actually are, and it's why we're here. We can claim it if we put forth the effort. In building up character, in making for everything that is good and great, in bringing peace to others and peace to one's own self, religion is the highest motive power, and therefore ought to be studied from that standpoint. So that's a very aspirational, very motive. It's like religion is but which religion? That's the problem when you make such statements. The super sensuous claims of knowledge are usually come with only way stickers attached to it. Everybody's claiming or the highest way or the best way. How do we? So Swamiji always moving towards a trying to find universal principles. He's going to try to spread it out a little bit so we can approach this as a topic without getting caught into sectarianism and things like that that's so prevalent in religion. When we're trying to find the infinite, we immediately, as soon as anything's said about the infinite, people start. Not only we can argue about like the color of something, whether that yellow dress or blue dress or when on the internet was yellow or blue, whatever that thing is, right. But you have the wrong view of the Trinity. I can kill you. It's like or you deserve to die. It's like religion. Talking about the most absolute, people get absolutely crazy and most limited, right? So Swamiji is always gaming. He's always rooting for this broad and aspirational definition and motivation of religion, of the human soul searching for the infinite, and the infinite calling the soul out of the finite, without getting caught in the mess of religion. Unfortunately. Let's see what Swamiji says. Got it. It's a tough one. Religion must be studied on a broader basis than formerly. That's his opening statement, right? We have to study now religion differently than we used to study it, right? All narrow, limiting, fighting ideas of religion have to go. These are underlined. These are all underlined statements. All narrow, limited, fighting ideas of religion have to go. All sectarian ideas and tribal or national ideas of religion must be given up. That each tribe or nation should have its own particular God and think that every other is wrong is a superstition that should belong to the past. The new definition of superstition. Right? Now the superstition is that my religion alone is the real religion, my God alone is the real God. That's superstition. Because actually, you see, the word superstition is a complicated word and a loaded word, right? But the things we used to claim for people would claim for their religion and describe other people's religion. I mean, superstition could be described as somebody else's religion, right? Other people's beliefs and practices, that's superstition, right? Right. It's a simple definition. But now we have, we're no longer like separated from people. I mean, there's the internet. There's bookstores. We're people at work, at school, in elementary school, of different religions, and so we could see and all the things we claim for ours, we see just as realistically existing. Anything that we claim that our religion does for whatever proofs or examples or evidence we have for our religion are found in other religions. Any things that we critique in other religions are also found in our religions, right? So you can no longer make this type of statements. These type of statements are no longer justifiable, therefore superstitious. That's Swamiji's language, right? Right. You can't make only my religion is like that. What about? But we find that in other religions. No, they're wrong, but we find that in our religion, right? Or and things like that. That each tribe or nation should have its own particular God and think that every other is wrong is a superstition that should belong to the past. All such ideas must be abandoned. As the human mind broadens, its spiritual ideas broaden too. The time has already come when a man cannot record a thought without it reaching to all corners of the earth. I mean, talk about that. This is before the internet. Pre-Facebook and Twitter, it's like amazing, But even then, it's like actually one of the reasons I remember in my philosophy, history classes, it's like, Martin Luther nails his thesis on the door, and within a week it had hit all Europe, right? Within a month, the whole Western world had it because of the printing press, right? If he had pounded those things a year before, it would have taken, the fire wouldn't have started, right? But now it happens like that, And this is already the beginning of this connection. Time has already come when man cannot record a thought without it reaching all corners of the earth. By merely physical means, we have come in touch with the whole world. So the future religions of the world have to become universal and wide. The religious ideas of the future must embrace all that exists in the world that is good and great, and at the same time must have infinite scope for further development. All that was good in the past must be preserved, and the doors must be kept open to the future additions to the already existing store. Religions must also be inclusive and not look down with contempt upon one another because of their particular ideas of God, because their particular ideas of God are different. In my life, I have seen a great many spiritual men, a great many sensible persons who do not believe in God at all. That is to say, not in our sense of the word. Perhaps they understood God better than what we can ever do. It's a very big statement. The idea of the personal God, the impersonal, the infinite, the moral law, the ideal man, all these have come under the definition of religion. And when religions have become thus broadened, their power for good will have increased 100-fold. Religion, having tremendous power in them, have often done more injury to the world than good. Of course, I mentioned at the beginning, Swami usually always points that out, simply on account of their narrowness and their limitation. So actually, all the things that we complain about, I mean, we have really legitimate complaints about religion in the world. But you can always trace it back, Swamiji claims, to limitations, narrowness and limitation. So it's like, sometimes I think anything we just, in our discussions here, in our morning talks, and in our talks amongst the devotees, any idea that comes is like, if it's going to survive and be valuable, it has to be universalized. And I think Swamiji, you mentioned Sri Ramakrishna, and the talks in America, you almost never talk. But I think this is a unique thing of Sri Ramakrishna. Things that were very particular. He showed he showed how he universalized each one of them. Every idea was taken to a universal perspective, right? And therefore, valuable even now here. Even at the present time, we find many sects and societies with almost the same ideas fighting each other because one does not want to set forth those ideas in precisely the same way as another. That we see. Therefore, religions will have to broaden. Religious ideas will have to become universal, vast, and infinite. Then alone shall we find the fullest play of religion. For the power of religion has not only just begun to manifest itself in the world. It is sometimes said that religions are dying out, that spiritual ideas are dying out in the world. To me, it seems that they have just begun to grow. The power of religion, broadened and purified, is going to penetrate every part of the human life. So long as religion was in the hands of a chosen few, of the body of priests, it was in temples, churches, books, dogmas, ceremonials, forms, and rituals. But when we come to the real, spiritual, universal concept, then and then alone will religion become real and living. It will come into our very nature, live in our every moment, penetrate every pore of our society, and be infinitely more powerful for good than it has ever been before. What is needed is fellow feeling between the different types of religion. Since they are all strands. What is needed is a fellow feeling between the different types of religion, since they all stand or fall together. A fellow feeling which springs from mutual esteem and mutual respect, and not the condescending, patronizing expressions of goodwill unfortunate in vogue with many at the present time. And above all, this fellow feeling is needed between types of religious expression coming from the study of mental phenomena, unfortunately even now laying exclusive claim to the name of religion, and those expressions of religion whose heads, as it were, are penetrating more into the secrets of heaven, though their feet are clinging to the earth. I mean the so-called materialistic science. It's a very strange sentence, but Swamiji is pointing out that just like we have to, the way we treat religion, we have to treat science. They're also searching for the truth. So it's Swamiji always, not only were religions not contradictory to each other in one sense, but religion is doesn't contradict. Science and religion are not enemies. Also, they have to find that same goal. Final paragraph. To bring this harmony, both will have to make concessions, sometimes very large, nay more, sometimes painful, but each will find itself the better for the sacrifice and more advanced in truth. And in the end, the knowledge which is confined within the domain of time and space will meet and become one with that which is beyond them both. When the mind and the senses cannot reach, the absolute, the infinite, the one without a second. Hari Om Tat. I told you he revs up at the end, So tomorrow Swami Vivekananda's birthday by the date. That's why we decided to read. This is a talk. Many people came late. Or I talked. You guys came proper time. I'm talking late. Called